Imagine for a second that the filing system in your mind just, well, crashes.
Oh, that sounds terrifying.
Right. You know that neat logical structure you rely on every single day?
The one that sorts memories and keeps your life making sense.
Exactly. Imagine all of those folders suddenly dissolving, and instead of that clear, organized logic, you are just bombarded with raw, unedited, dreamlike imagery.
Like it's just swirling all around you.
Yeah, demanding your attention. And the wildest part is you are completely wide awake.
Which is incredibly disorienting.
It really is. And welcome to another deep dive, by the way. Today, we're taking you into the reality of a psychotic break.
And we really need to emphasize that it's not a broken brain, like the movies always tell us.
Or some permanent loss of humanity.
Exactly. Our mission today is to demystify this often misunderstood world of psychosis.
Yeah, because we're looking at a stack of groundbreaking research today. We've got a recent book called Why Psychosis is Not So Crazy by clinical psychologist Stein Van Hool.
Highly recommend that one.
Plus an April 2023 systematic review from the journal Schizophrenia, and a fascinating study from the International Journal of Mental Health Nursing.
All of which prove that psychosis is deeply connected to everyday stress, existential struggles, and, well, the mind's desperate attempt to survive.
To survive a reality that just feels unlivable.
Precisely. Because the pop culture stereotypes we've all been fed, they aren't just inaccurate, they're actively harmful.
Oh, totally. When people hear the word psychosis, the immediate association is, unpredictable danger.
Right. There, we picture someone who is fundamentally broken, forever disconnected from reality,
But if we actually look at the clinical data,
and the subjective experience of people going through it.
yeah, a completely different narrative emerges.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to completely reset our understanding of who actually experiences this.
We really do. Because if we assume psychosis is this incredibly rare monster in the dark, the actual numbers are going to be a shock.
Let's talk about the general population then. How common is it to experience a glitch in that mental filing system? It's far more common than most people realize. Research indicates that roughly 15% of the general population,
Wait, 15%?
yes, 15%, has had short-lived, isolated experiences that could be classified as psychosis-like.
That's, what, roughly 1 in 7 people?
Exactly.
So if you're sitting in a crowded coffee shop right now, several people around you have probably experienced this.
Absolutely.
What does a psychosis-like experience actually look like, though? Like, for the average person?
Well, it's often things we just brush off or even romanticize. It could be hearing someone clearly call your name in a totally empty house.
Oh, I've had that happen.
Right. Or it could be the intense feeling of a deceased loved one standing right there in the room with you.
Oh, wow.
Or even holding on to a profoundly strong, completely irrational belief for a short time, maybe after several nights of really bad sleep deprivation.
So it exists on a spectrum. It's a momentary lapse, not a permanent state.
Exactly. Now, moving along that spectrum, out of the general population, about 7% have experiences that are clinically classified as psychotic.
Okay, 7%.
But here is the critical distinction that completely shatters this stereotype. Out of that 7%, only 3% experience a situation severe enough to actually require psychiatric intervention.
Wait, really? Meaning that more than half the people who experience genuine psychotic symptoms just navigate through them?
Yes, without ever needing to be hospitalized or heavily medicated by a professional.
That is wild.
The symptom occurs, the mind processes the stressor, and the person just returns to normal functioning.
So what about actual diagnosable psychotic disorders, like schizophrenia?
Right, conditions like schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, the lifetime prevalence for those narrows down to between 1.5 and 3%.
Quick clarification for me here. I hear schizophrenia a lot, but what exactly is schizoaffective disorder? Is that like a blend of different things?
It is, yeah. Think of schizoaffective disorder as a condition where a person experiences symptoms of schizophrenia like hallucinations or delusions, but they simultaneously experience a major mood disorder.
Like severe depression.
Or bipolar mania, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a dual-layered struggle. But even within this group, which translates to roughly 5 to 10 million people in the U.S. alone, the recovery data is remarkably optimistic.
Which completely runs counter to the narrative of an inevitable tragic decline.
It really does.
Because I was reading through the long-term outcome data in our research stack, and you don't just get a diagnosis and immediately lose your future.
Not at all.
Right.
Let's break down the reality of recovery here. About 15% of these clinical cases involve just 1 or 2 brief episodes in a person's entire lifetime.
Wow.
After that, They recover entirely. Zero lingering clinical symptoms.
That's amazing.
Then you have another 30% who experience an episodic course.
Meaning it's more like a severe flare-up of a physical illness?
Exactly. They might have multiple episodes over the years, maybe triggered by extreme stress, but in between those episodes, they return to their baseline.
And their baseline is totally functional.
Completely functional, no residual symptoms. And then another 40% are also episodic. They return to a highly functional state, just with mild, lingering symptoms between flare-ups that they learn to manage.
Okay, so if I'm doing the math right here, we're talking about roughly 85% of people with a severe psychotic disorder who are either fully recovering or living highly functional episodic lives.
Right. Only about 15% of cases result in a poor outcome with continuous significant impairment.
Only 15% fit that worst-case movie scenario.
Exactly.
I think about it like this. Treating mental health is a lot like physical health. Just as a persistent, painful cough doesn't automatically mean you have a terminal lung disease, a psychotic experience doesn't automatically equal a lifelong debilitating condition.
That is a perfect framing.
It's just a symptom. It's your body or your mind responding to an overwhelming stressor.
Yes, a symptom is just a signal that something in the system is overwhelmed. So, if psychosis is a symptom on a broad spectrum touching millions of lives, we need to understand the mechanism.
What's actually happening in the engine room of the mind.
Exactly, when that symptom flares up.
Well, to understand the engine room, one of our main sources today, clinical psychologist Stein van Hool, brings us back to some foundational concepts from Sigmund Freud.
Ah, yes.
About how human thought is organized. Freud argued that our mental functioning operates in two distinct modes. The first is secondary process thinking.
Which is the stuff you and I are using right now.
Right. Logic, order, rational connections, the things that govern conscious, waking thought.
It's that internal narrator that respects the laws of reality. The voice that says, if I drop this glass, it will shatter on the floor.
It understands time and space.
Cause and effect, yeah. It allows us to communicate effectively because we all implicitly agree on these rules.
Right. But running underneath that constantly is the second mode, primary process thinking.
And this one is very different.
Completely different. It's the unconscious, free-flowing, highly associative mode of thought. It doesn't care about logic or physics.
Not at all.
It connects ideas based on emotional resonance or just visual and auditory similarities.
The best way to understand primary process thinking is to look at your dreams. In a dream, you might be standing in your childhood kitchen, but somehow it's also your current office.
Yeah, and your boss walks in, but they have your mother's voice.
Exactly. And in the dream, this makes complete, terrifying, or joyful sense. The associations are purely emotional, not logical.
So it's like your brain's logical filing system crashes, and the screensaver of raw, unedited dream imagery just takes over your desktop while you're still awake.
That is exactly it. But let's deepen that screensaver analogy for a second.
Okay.
Because it's not just random code or meaningless colors flashing on the screen. Imagine the images on that screensaver are made entirely of your deepest, most unprocessed fears, desires, and traumas.
Oh, wow. So it's the raw emotional data of your life, completely unfiltered.
Yes. It's an incredibly passive, overwhelming experience where your personal agency is just stripped away. You aren't thinking the thoughts are happening to you.
That sounds exhausting.
This raises an important question, though. What actually pushes a mind over that edge?
Why does the secondary process fail in the first place?
Right, because as we said, it's not just a random biological misfire.
Well, researchers recently looked at over 2,000 patients across 8 different countries to study relapse triggers.
A huge study.
Massive.
Yeah.
And the culprit wasn't always some huge movie-style trauma like surviving a war zone. 10 out of the 13 studies focused on stress pointed to something much more ordinary, psychosocial stress.
We're talking about major interpersonal conflicts, going through a brutal breakup, or even just moving homes.
Wait, just the stress of packing up boxes and changing apartments can trigger a break from reality?
Well, it's not the cardboard boxes that cause the break. Van Hill's theory explains that psychosis is deeply tied to existential struggles. We all experience stress. But a psychotic break happens when an event is so profoundly disruptive to your specific sense of identity that it completely overwhelms your ability to organize your thoughts.
So it's the mind's inability to symbolically frame or comprehend the stressful event.
Exactly. Think about a devastating breakup. Your entire narrative of the future, your sense of safety, your daily routines, they are all shattered.
Right.
If the standard language and logical structures you normally rely on aren't strong enough to hold the weight of that grief, the logical narrative just collapses.
The mind retreats into the primary process because it's literally the only tool left to process the emotional magnitude of what happened.
What's fascinating here is that the psychosis actually contains a subjective truth.
The hallucinations aren't just nonsense.
No, they are the mind grappling with a very real emotional collapse. And looking at that same study of the 2,000 patients, there was one detail that stood out above everything else regarding relapse.
Oh, the social withdrawal part.
Yes, every single study that looked at social withdrawal found that it drastically increases the risk of a psychotic break.
Because pulling away from people is the ultimate catalyst for the logical system to fail.
Totally. When you are socially isolated, you lose the sounding board of your community.
You lose the shared language.
And the subtle reality checks that everyday conversation provides. Think about the last time you were incredibly anxious about something and you finally talked it out with a friend.
Oh yeah, just the act of putting it into shared logical language usually reduces the anxiety.
Exactly. When you withdraw, you lose that anchor and you drift entirely into your own internal world.
That makes terrifying sense. But it also presents a huge problem. If a person in crisis has lost their ability to use our shared logical language, how do they ever recover?
It's difficult.
How do they process that trauma if their usual words don't work anymore?
They have to invent a new language. They have to find a way to translate that raw primary process imagery into something they can actually pull out of their head and share with the outside world.
And historically, the most effective bridge for this has been creativity.
Yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at Annie Rogers.
Ah, yeah.
She's a renowned clinical psychologist and psychoanalyst who actually experienced severe psychosis herself.
Her work is phenomenal.
It is. And she realized that standard talk therapy just wasn't enough because not everything in a psychotic break can be translated perfectly back into neat, logical sentences.
Right. There is always this leftover, untranslatable element.
Which she beautifully called the nub of nonsense.
The nub of nonsense. It's a brilliant phrase because it validates the experience. It acknowledges that some aspects of extreme human trauma are fundamentally absurd or elusive.
They defy logic, but they still hold immense meaning.
Yes. And Rogers didn't just try to write down her thoughts to capture that nonsense. She used photography and art.
She would physically stage photos, right?
Yeah.
Creating visual representations of her internal chaos.
Exactly. By turning the hallucination into a photograph, she could put the internal image outside herself. She could look at it objectively, and more importantly, she could show it to someone else.
We see the exact same dynamic with Carl Jung, one of the founding fathers of modern psychology.
Oh, this is a great example.
Most people don't realize his journey included acute, terrifying psychotic episodes. This happened right after his incredibly painful professional and personal split with Sigmund Freud.
Which was a massive existential crisis for Jung. Freud wasn't just his boss.
Right, he was his mentor, his father figure.
His mental anchor. When that relationship shattered, Jung's entire sense of reality and professional identity was destabilized. He began experiencing overwhelming visions and auditory hallucinations.
He thought he was going entirely mad.
He really did. But look at how he coped. He didn't just sit in a room and let the screensaver run. He engaged with it.
He documented the chaos in what became known as the Red Book.
And he didn't just scribble notes. He used painstaking calligraphy. He painted elaborate, highly structured mandalas to give form to the formless anxiety.
He went even further than that, though. He literally bought a plot of land on Lake Zurich and built a sanctuary called the Bullingen Tower.
Oh, I love this part.
He didn't hire a crew. He hauled the stone himself. He chopped the wood, carried the water, and physically built a medieval-style stone tower as a safe, tangible realm for his irrationality to exist.
Incredible.
But hold on, let me push back on this for a second.
Sure.
If I have a friend who is actively hallucinating demons, my instinct is to point at the corner of the room and say, you know, there are no demons there. Look, it's just a normal chair.
Right.
You're telling me I shouldn't do that. Conventional wisdom says we should pull them back to reality, not buy them a canvas to paint the demon or help them build a stone tower for it.
It's a totally natural instinct to want to pull them back to logic.
Doesn't leaning into the hallucination risk pulling them further into the delusion?
Well, think about the mechanics of what's happening. The logical process has crashed. If you tell them it's just a chair, you aren't making the demon disappear for them. Okay. You are just proving to them that you cannot see their reality.
Oh.
You are confirming that they are utterly alone with the terror.
I never thought about it like that.
Now, medication is absolutely a valuable tool to stabilize severe distress and quiet the nervous system. Facilities like Crownview Psychiatric Institute note its vital role in crisis management.
So medication has its place.
Absolutely. But what Annie Rogers and Carl Jung show us is that relying solely on medication or suppression completely overlooks the psychological meaning of the episode.
You might chemically quiet the hallucination, but you haven't helped the person process the existential crisis.
Right, the crisis that caused the filing system to crash in the first place.
Yeah.
Healing requires validating their emotional reality and helping them translate that chaos into a new, shareable narrative.
But creating that narrative requires an audience, right? You can paint the most profound picture of your internal world or build a stone tower, but if there's no one there to look at it, you're still isolated.
Exactly.
Which brings us right back to the danger of social withdrawal. Healing requires a community, friends, family, therapists who are actually capable of receiving those new, bizarre expressions.
The individual needs to develop their own tools, but the community has to be ready to catch them.
Right.
This brings us to a fascinating study from the International Journal of Mental Health Nursing conducted in China. They tracked 248 subjects who had received outpatient treatment for schizophrenia.
Specifically looking at how their daily habits affected their risk of relapse.
And they found a massive divide between what they called positive and negative coping skills.
Yeah, they proved that positive coping skills actively reduce the risk of another psychotic break.
And they defined these skills as active optimism, regular physical exercise, and crucially, social participation.
Because these behaviors don't just distract the person. They generate a belief in their own agency.
They rebuild the shared narrative of reality.
On the flip side, negative coping strategies like avoidance, trying to mentally escape the distress, and especially social withdrawal significantly increase the risk of relapse.
It's a vicious cycle. You feel overwhelmed by the primary process thinking, so you pull away from your friends because you feel crazy.
But pulling away destroys the shared logical narrative you desperately need to stay grounded.
So you slip even further into the psychosis, which places a tremendous responsibility on the listener.
Yeah, whether you are a clinical professional, a parent, a spouse, or a friend, how do you respond when someone you care about starts expressing that primary process chaos?
How do you listen to the nub of nonsense without just demanding they act normal?
Well, Manhill shares an incredibly humbling story about this from his own early career that completely changed how I think about therapy.
Oh, the Mario story.
Yes. He was working as a junior clinical psychologist with a young man named Mario. Mario had Down syndrome and was experiencing severe psychotic episodes.
He had withdrawn almost entirely, right?
Yeah, locking himself in his attic room, endlessly talking to an invisible companion.
Van Hool, like many young professionals, wanted to be the hero.
Of course.
He wanted to use his shiny new academic expertise to magically break through Mario's isolation.
So he drives out to Mario's house on a rainy day. He's wearing his absolute best suit because he has a very important, fancy meeting afterward.
He is practically radiating this, I am the expert savior,
Yeah.
I will fix this patient energy.
Yeah. He marches quickly up the mossy garden path, his mind a million miles away on his own agenda, and his feet just fly out from under him.
Ouch.
He slips and lands completely flat on his back in the wet, muddy grass. His suit is ruined, his ego is shattered.
And Mario, who had been completely isolated and unresponsive in his attic, happens to look out the window and witnesses the entire thing.
Wait, so what does Mario do? Does he just ignore him?
No, this is the profound part. Mario actually breaks his own isolation. He comes downstairs, opens the front door, looks at this supposedly brilliant doctor covered in mud, and asks, "You okay?"
Oh, wow.
He goes and gets Van Hool a towel and says, "Here, clean yourself up."
That is incredible. So the actual therapeutic breakthrough didn't come from some clever clinical technique at all.
It didn't come from Van Hool exerting his professional authority or trying to pull Mario into his logical world. The connection happened because the therapist was literally knocked off his pedestal.
He dropped his ego.
He had to accept his own clumsiness and vulnerability, and suddenly they weren't doctor and patient. They were just two vulnerable human beings in a room.
Van Hool realized he just needed to be present. He makes this brilliant comparison about how we should approach psychotic speech.
I love this analogy.
He says we should listen to someone in Psychosis the same way we view a surrealist David Lynch film.
Or an abstract sculpture by Yayoi Kusama.
Exactly. Think about watching a surrealist film. You don't sit in the theater angrily demanding that every single frame makes perfect, logical, secondary process sense.
You don't yell at the screen because the physics are wrong.
Right. You allow yourself to be captivated. You look for the emotional meaning, the underlying themes of grief or fear that the artist is trying to convey through the absurdity.
You don't dismiss it as nonsense just because your logical filing system can't categorize it immediately. You lean in and try to feel what they're feeling.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, when caregivers or friends react to psychosis with anxiety-driven demands for normalcy.
When they exert power by saying, stop saying that, it isn't real.
Yeah, they only create more distance and fear. Radical, empathic, humble listening is the ultimate coping mechanism we can offer someone in crisis.
We have to be willing to sit in the mud with them and tolerate the nub of nonsense.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive imagining our mind's filing system crashing. What we've learned is that psychosis is not some random monster lurking in the dark. It is a human mind that has become overwhelmed by the sheer groundlessness of existence.
Retreating into a primary process dream state because the waking world became too heavy to hold.
Whether you are supporting a loved one, working in the mental health field, or honestly, just trying to manage your own daily stressors and existential anxieties, the takeaway is incredibly clear.
Positive coping skills.
Genuine social connection.
And radically empathetic listening. Dropping our egos and letting go of the need to constantly enforce logic.
These are our best, most reliable defenses against the breaking of the mind.
I'd like to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on what we've discussed today.
Oh, definitely.
We've established that psychosis is fundamentally a crisis of meaning, a collapse of our personal narratives when faced with profound stress.
But take a look at our modern world.
It's pretty chaotic right now. Exactly. Right now, on a global scale, our shared societal narratives and our collective common sense seem to be fracturing.
Yeah, the basic rules of logic we use to communicate are breaking down.
We are increasingly isolated behind screens, highly anxious, and deeply polarized. If that environment of isolation and narrative collapse is the primary trigger for the logical mind to crash, are we, collectively, as a society, at a higher risk of experiencing these primary process breaks?
Oh, that is a heavy question.
And if so, what does a healthy society-wide coping skill even look like?
It really makes you wonder how sturdy our own collective filing systems really are. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Keep your screensavers in check, stay connected to the people around you, and we'll catch you next time.